hospital monitor beeped once, then again, then in that uneven, stuttering rhythm that makes nurses move faster and doctors speak quieter. The nurse stood at the foot of the bed, holding a clipboard she had already read 3 times, and she looked at the woman lying there. This still beautiful woman with the haunted eyes and the bare ring finger and the emergency contact form that had only one name on it. And she asked the question she had been trained to ask. Is there anyone else we can call? Family? Anyone at all? Clara Whitmore did not answer. She was looking at the door. The same door her son had just walked out of 20 minutes ago. She had watched him go, that tall, composed, deep brown-skinned man in the charcoal suit who had her cheekbones and his father's stubbornness and 23 years of silence in his eyes. And she had said nothing to stop him, because she had no right to. Because she had used up every right she ever had to that boy on a rainy night when he was 7 years old, and she had chosen a suitcase over him. But what Eli did not know, what she had never told him, never told anyone, was that his name was not just on her emergency contact form because he was her son. It was there because without him, she was going to die. The doctor had been very clear. The condition had been progressing for 2 years. The transplant was not optional anymore. It was urgent, and in a database of thousands of potential matches, one name had come back as compatible. One, his, and as a monitor beside her skipped another beat, Clara closed her eyes and felt the full, crushing weight of what she had done to her own life settle over her like a second skin. She had traded the only person who could save her for a man who had never once looked back. Before we go any further, tell us in the comments where you are watching from right now. We would love to hear from you. And if you are new here, click that subscribe button so you never miss any of our upcoming stories. Now, let us get back into it. Eli sat in his car in the hospital parking lot for 41 minutes. He knew it was 41 minutes because he watched the clock on his dashboard with the same focused attention he brought to everything. The same discipline that had carried him from a foster home bedroom to a boardroom, from nobody's son to his own man. His hands were on the steering wheel. The engine was off. The charcoal suit jacket was folded on the passenger seat. His white dress shirt was open one button at the collar, and he sat very, very still. The stillness was something he had perfected over decades. As a child, it had been protective. A small boy learning that if he made himself very quiet, very contained, the pain had less surface area to grab onto. As an adult, it had become his greatest professional asset. People in boardrooms read stillness as power. They leaned into it. They wanted to feel it. But sitting in that parking lot, in the amber wash of a Nigerian hospital's exterior lights, the stillness was not power. It was a thing underneath power. The thing that power had been built on top of, like a tower on a fault line. He was 7 years old again. He could feel it, not as a thought, but as a physical thing. The cold of the pavement through bare feet, the weight of a soaked backpack, the way a door sounds when it is locked from the inside by someone who knows you are on the other side. He had told himself for 23 years that he had processed it, that he had taken apart, examined every piece, understood it completely, and filed it somewhere it could not move him. But she had said, "I'm your mother," and something had moved. Not much, not visibly, but enough. He started the car. He drove home through Lagos traffic that had no interest in his internal crisis, through streets that smelled like Sia smoke and rain and exhaust, through a city that always felt more like his family than any blood relative ever had. His apartment was exactly as he had left it. Clean, precise, a space that reflected a man who controlled everything within his reach. He poured 2 fingers of whiskey, set on the counter, and did not drink it. He sat on the edge of his couch and looked at the floor. In 22 years of building a life, he had faced suppliers who tried to cheat him, partners who tried to outmaneuver him, investors who tried to own him. He had navigated every one of those situations with total composure because the stakes were always, at their core, about money and strategy. This was not about money and strategy. This was about the drawing. He didn't know yet about the drawing. That would come later. But something in him, that deep underground, carefully buried part of him, already sensed that this was not finished. That walking out of that room had not been the ending he had rehearsed so many times in his head. That closure, unlike what people said about it, did not arrive like a door clicking shut. It arrived when it arrived at all, like a long, slow exhalation. He had not exhaled yet. His phone rang at 9:47 p.m. Unknown number. He looked at it for 3 rings. He almost let it go to voicemail. He had a strict policy about unknown numbers after hours. Let the machine take it. Review in the morning. Respond only if necessary. He picked it up. Mr. Okafor? My name is Dr. Adiz Nwachukwu. I'm calling from St. Matthew's Hospital. We have a patient, Clara Whitmore, who has listed you as her next of kin. The silence that followed was very precise. You have the wrong person, Eli said. His voice was professional, calibrated, the voice of a man who handled uncomfortable situations by immediately reframing them as administrative errors. I understand this may be unexpected, the doctor said. Her voice was gentle but not apologetic. She was clearly someone accustomed to having difficult conversations with people who did not want to have them. But her file lists you specifically by your legal birth name, Eli Whitmore. She was very deliberate about it. What is her condition? The question came out before he decided to ask it. The doctor paused briefly, registering that the conversation had shifted. She has a degenerative cardiac condition. It has progressed significantly. We have been managing it, but she is now at a stage where management is no longer sufficient. She needs a transplant. Then find a transplant. We have been searching for 18 months, Dr. Nwachukwu said evenly. We found one compatible donor match in the entire database. Another silence. I'm going to stop you there, Eli said. Mr. Okafor, whatever you are about to say, I'm asking you not to say it. I understand, the doctor said. I do, and I want to be very clear. No one is asking you to do anything tonight. No one is asking you to make any decision right now. I called because she asked me to call, because she said you had come to see her, and she did not have the courage to tell you herself. Eli stood up from the couch. He walked to the window of his apartment. The floor-to-ceiling glass that looked out over the Lego skyline, the city he had built himself into, the view that on every previous night of his life had represented arrival. Tonight it represented something else entirely. She should have had the courage to tell me herself, he said quietly. Yes, the doctor agreed. She should have. He ended the call. He stood at the window for a long time. The city glittered below him, indifferent, brilliant, alive. And somewhere in it, in a hospital bed in a room that smelled of antiseptic and consequence, the woman who had locked the door on him 23 years ago was lying with his name on her emergency form and his blood as her only remaining option. He thought about the boy on the pavement. He thought about what that boy would have given. Anything, everything, just for her to open the door. And then he thought about something he had never allowed himself to think before. Not what she had taken from him, but what walking away tonight would take from him. If you walk away now, said a voice that was not quite his own, you become her. He put his palm flat against the cold glass. He stood there until the city began to blur. If you're still watching up to this point, type, I'm still here in the comment section right now, because what happens next is the part no one sees coming. He did not sleep that night, not in the restless, frustrated way of someone who wants to sleep and cannot. In the deliberate, eyes-open way of someone who has decided that the night deserves to be sat through rather than escaped. He reviewed the decision from every angle the way he reviewed acquisitions, systematically, without sentiment, examining motives and outcomes and risk. He identified the emotional variables and tried to set them aside. He constructed arguments for both positions and stress-tested them. None of it worked, because this was not an acquisition. This was not a strategy problem. And the part of him that was still, underneath all the charcoal suits and composed silences and $12 million revenues, a 7-year-old boy who had loved his mother with his whole uncomplicated heart, that part was not interested in logic. At 6:14 in the morning, Eli put on a plain dark shirt and trousers, left his suit at home for the first time in years, and drove back to St. Matthew's Hospital. He told himself he was going to get information, to understand the medical situation fully before making any decision, to behave like a rational adult rather than a wounded child. He walked into the hospital like a man who owned the building. Head up, pace steady, eyes forward, and followed the directions the front desk gave him without breaking stride. He pushed open the door of room 14B. Clara was awake. She was sitting up slightly against pillows, no makeup, hair loose and slightly tangled, wearing a hospital gown that made her look simultaneously older and younger than her 42 years. There was an 4 in her left arm. The cardiac monitor beeped it steady, slightly irregular rhythm beside her. She saw him, and she broke. Not gently, not quietly, not in the restrained, dignified way of a woman who had spent 2 decades performing composure in luxury apartments. She broke the way a person breaks when they have been holding something for so long that the sight of the one person they have been holding it against finally causes the walls to give out completely. Her face collapsed. Her shoulders shook. Her hands came up to cover her mouth and then fell back to bed because there was nothing to cover, nothing to hide, nothing left to perform. She wept. The sound of it was raw and ugly and real in a way that her tears at the business forum had not been, because those tears had still carried, underneath them, a thread of hope that he might respond. These tears had no hope in them. These were the tears of someone who expected nothing and was crying anyway. Eli stood in the doorway. He did not go to her. He did not comfort her. But he did not leave. He pulled the visitor's chair away from the wall, positioned it a careful 3 feet from her bed. Not close enough to suggest forgiveness, not far enough to suggest cruelty, and he sat down, and he waited for her to finish. It took several minutes. When she finally quieted, she wiped her face with the back of her hand and looked at him with those large dark eyes that he had inherited and spent a lifetime wishing he hadn't. "You came back," she said. Her voice was wrecked. "I came for information," he said, "not for sentiment." She nodded. She had expected nothing better and received it. "The doctor told you," she said. "She told me enough." Clara looked at the 4 in her arm. "I didn't plan this. I want you to know that. I didn't put your name on that form as a manipulation. I put it there because you're the only family I have, and because I thought if something happened and you never knew, that would be worse. For you." She paused. "I know that might sound absurd, given everything." "It does sound absurd," Eli said. "I know." Silence. Dr. Nwachukwu came in 20 minutes later. A composed, sharp-eyed woman in her 40s who had clearly dealt with enough family crisis situations to know how to navigate a room where the emotional temperature was this complex. She greeted Eli, thanked him for coming, and sat down across from him with a folder. She explained the condition clearly, the progression, the timeline, the transplant requirement, the compatibility results. She did not soften it or dramatize it. She delivered the way good doctors deliver terrible news, directly, humanely, with space for questions. Eli asked 11 questions. All of them were clinical. None of them were personal. He asked about success rates, recovery timelines, surgical risk, postoperative care requirements, the margin of error in the compatibility assessment, and whether there were any other potential matches that had not yet been explored. Clara watched him ask these questions with an expression that was equal parts grief and awe, because even now, even in this, she could see the boy she had raised in the first 7 years of his life. The boy who had always needed to understand everything before he could feel safe. The boy who had asked questions the way other children asked for hugs. She had not been there for the years that turned that boy into this man, but she recognized his blueprint in him still, and the recognition was a specific kind of grief that had no name. "I need time," Eli said finally, closing the folder the doctor had slid toward him. "Of course," Dr. Nwachukwu said, "but I want to be honest with you about the window. We have weeks, not months." He nodded, stood, buttoned the single button he had left open on his shirt, a small, precise, self-collected gesture. He looked at Clara once more. She was looking at her hands. "I'm not doing this for you," he said. She looked up. His eyes were steady. Not angry, not soft, just honest. "If I decide to do this, and I have not decided, it won't be because I forgave you. It won't be because I feel some obligation to a relationship that was ended by your choice, not mine. It will be because of who I am, not who you are." Clara's chin trembled. "That's more than I deserve," she whispered. "Yes," he said. "It is." And he left. The days that followed were the strangest of Eli's adult life. He returned to work. He ran his meetings. He reviewed contracts and made decisions and had the same lunch he always had at the same desk at the same time. From the outside, nothing had changed. Inside, everything was in motion. He found himself doing things he had not done in years. He drove past the neighborhood where he had grown up, the one with the small apartments and the pavement he knew the texture by memory. He sat outside the building for a while. The door was different now, newer, painted blue, but the pavement was the same. He ate suya from a roadside vendor at 11 o'clock at night, sitting on a plastic stool, and he could not have explained why, except that it was a thing he had eaten as a child when his mother was happy, and they had a little extra, and she would wrap the meat in newspaper, and they would eat it together at the kitchen table like it was a feast. He called his former partner, the one who had told him there was a room inside him she couldn't enter, and he did not say much. He asked how she was. She was surprised but gracious. They talked for 22 minutes. She did not ask why he was calling. She seemed to understand that some calls do not have reasons that can be stated. After he hung up, he sat in the quiet of his apartment and asked himself the question he had been circling for days. Not can he forgive her. That was too large, too loaded, too far away. But can he help her? Those were different questions. Forgiveness required the past to be resolved. Helping only required the present to be faced. And Eli had always, at his core, been a man who faced things. He went back to the hospital on a Thursday evening. Clara was sitting up in bed when he arrived. She had brushed her hair. She was wearing her own clothes, a simple dark blouse someone must have brought for her. She looked fragile but present, like someone who had decided to participate in whatever came next rather than simply endure it. He sat in the same chair, the same 3 feet away. They sat in silence for a moment. Then Clara reached toward the small drawer of the bedside table and took out an envelope. It was old, the paper soft and slightly yellowed, the seal long since opened and resealed with tape that had dried and peeled. She held it out to him. He looked at it without taking it. "What is it?" "Something I kept," she said, "for 23 years. Every house I was in, Geneva, Lagos, everywhere, this came with me, in my bag. Always." She paused. "I need you to know that I never stopped knowing what I had done. I never forgot. I told myself I had. I was very good at performing forgetting, but I never actually did." He took the envelope. He opened it. Inside was a single piece of paper, folded twice, the creases deep from years of being opened and refolded. He opened it. It was a child's drawing, crayon, faded red and blue, and a yellow that had gone pale, a house with a triangular roof, and a sun in the corner the way all children draw suns. 2 figures in front of the house, one tall, one small. The tall one had a yellow dress. The small one had a huge smile rendered in a single curved crayon line. They were holding hands. At the bottom, in the shaky but determined handwriting of a child who had recently learned his letters, "Me and Mama forever." Eli stared at it. He had not remembered drawing this. He had no memory of it at all. But he recognized the handwriting as his own. He had seen his earliest school records once, during a period when he was trying to piece together his own history, and the letters had that same particular angle, that same pressing too hard quality of a child who wanted very badly to get it right. He had drawn this. He had given it to her. And she had carried it for 23 years across 2 continents, and through a life that had tried at every turn to make her into someone without tenderness. And she still had it. He did not cry, but something happened in his face that he could not entirely control. A brief, involuntary softening around his eyes, a loosening of the jaw he always held so precisely set. It lasted only a moment. Then the composure returned. But the moment had happened, and Clara had seen it. She said nothing. She did not reach for him or press the advantage or say anything that would have caused him to rebuild the wall immediately. She just watched him fold the drawing back along its old creases, slide it back into the envelope, and set it very carefully on the bedside table. "You kept this," he said. "Yes." "Through all of it?" "Yes." He looked at the envelope on the table for a long moment. Then he looked at her. "I'll do the test," he said. Clara's breath left her body all at once. "Eli." "James," he said. Automatic, but quieter than before. "James," she said, and the way she said it, careful, respectful, like a word she was learning in a new language, told him something he had not expected. that she was not trying to reclaim him, that she understood the name was his, not hers to use freely. "I'll do the tests," he said again, "and if the results confirm what the doctor said, I will consider the surgery. I am not promising you a relationship. I am not promising you forgiveness or access to my life or anything that you don't earn to the time that comes after this. If there's a time that comes after this, what I am promising is that I will not let someone die because I am too angry to act." She was crying again, not the broken weeping from before. These were quieter tears, the kind that fall because something has been said that is true and generous and more than was owed. "Why?" she asked, barely audible. He thought about it honestly. He owed her that. "Because I spent 23 years becoming someone who does not abandon people," he said. "And I am not about to stop now." The testing was done within the week. The results confirmed what the database had said. He was a match. The surgery was scheduled. The night before, Eli sat alone in his apartment. Not at his desk, not working, just sitting on the floor against the couch with his back to the seat cushions and his legs stretched out in front of him, the way he used to sit as a child in foster homes when the beds felt too formal for how he was feeling. He was not afraid of the surgery itself. He had read everything there was to read about the procedure, the risks, the recovery. He had assessed them the way he assessed every risk in his life, thoroughly and without drama, and he had decided they were acceptable. What he was sitting with was something else. He was sitting with the question of what came after. Not physically. Medically, he knew exactly what came after. But the other after, the one that no doctor could map for him. What did you do with a mother you had rebuilt yourself without? What was the architecture of a relationship between two people when one of them had constructed their entire identity in the other's absence? Where did you put someone who was simultaneously a stranger and the first person who had ever been supposed to love you? He did not have answers. He had something smaller, a starting point. He reached across the floor to his bag and took out the envelope. He held it. He did not open it. He did not need to. He had memorized it already. The crayon lines, the pale yellow sun, the two figures holding hands, the child handwriting pressing too hard into the paper. Me and Mama forever. He had been 7 when he drew that. 7-year-old Eli had not drawn it with any awareness of what forever meant or how easily it could be taken apart by a choice. He had drawn it because it was simply, completely true at the time. The whole truth of his world rendered in crayon. The man holding the envelope was 30 years old and understood exactly what forever meant and exactly how much it cost and exactly what happened to people who gave it without protecting themselves. He also understood, sitting on the floor in the dark with the city glittering outside his floor-to-ceiling windows, that the decision he had made was not weakness. This was, in fact, the hardest and most precise expression of his own strength, not because it was forgiveness, but because it was choice. His free, informed, uncoerced. That boy on the pavement had been given no choice. This man had every choice in the world, and he was choosing to act from his values rather than his wounds. That, he understood as he sat there, was what all those years had actually been building toward. Not the company, not the reputation, not the skyline view. This moment, this decision, this version of himself that could hold a crayon drawing and a lifetime of pain in the same 2 hands, without dropping either one. He put the envelope in his bag. He got up off the floor. He made himself a cup of tea, stood at the window, and watched the city for a while. Then he went to bed. Now, this next part is a part that will stay with you. So if you haven't already, hit that like button and share this video with someone who needs to hear this story. Because what Eli does next changes everything. The surgery took 6 hours. Eli woke up in a private recovery room with a dull ache in his side and a nurse checking his vitals and particular fluorescent blandness of a hospital ceiling that he'd looked up at before. Not in this hospital, but in this way as a child more than once. Dr. Nwachukwu came in at 2 o'clock. "Everything went well," she said. "She's in recovery. Vitals are stable. The early indicators are very positive." Eli nodded. "How are you feeling?" the doctor asked. "Like someone operated on me," he said. She smiled slightly. "That's appropriate." He was discharged after 4 days. Clara was not. Her recovery was longer, more complex. The cardiac work was extensive, and the body needed time to accept and integrate what had been given. But she was alive, stable, progressing. On the 7th day of her recovery, Eli came to visit. He was still moving carefully. Not dramatically, just with the particular deliberateness of a man whose body was reminding him it had been through something. He wore a plain dark shirt and trousers, no suit. He carried 2 cups of tea from the hospital canteen, the kind that came in styrofoam cups and tasted of almost nothing, which was fine. He set 1 cup on Clara's bedside table. She looked at it, then at him. "You didn't have to." "I was getting one anyway," he said, and sat down. They drank their terrible tea in silence for a while. It was not a comfortable silence. It was not yet, but it was a chosen one. 2 people deciding, without announcing it, to be in the same room without agenda. Clara spoke first. "I've been thinking," she said, "about what I want to say to you. I've been rehearsing it for days. I had this whole speech prepared." She paused. "I'm not going to give it." Eli looked at her over the rim of his cup. "It was full of explanations," she said. "And I realize that explanations are just excuses wearing a longer coat. You don't need my explanations. You live the consequences of my choices. You know them better than I do." He said nothing. "What I want to say," she continued more quietly, "is that you are the best thing I ever did, the only genuinely good thing. And I spent 23 years running from that instead of standing in it." Her voice was steady now. Not the broken weeping of before, not performance. Just a woman speaking plainly at the end of a very long journey. "I don't expect anything from you. I'm not asking to be in your life. I just need you to know that the boy in that drawing, the one who wrote forever, he deserved better, and you gave him better. You gave him yourself. And that is something I had nothing to do with, and everything I should have contributed to, and I will carry that for the rest of whatever time I have left." Eli set down his cup. He looked at his hands for a moment, those hands that had built everything from nothing, that had signed contracts and shaken hands and held a crayon drawing in the dark. "I'm not going to tell you it's fine," he said. "It isn't fine. What you did to that boy isn't something that becomes fine because time passed or because a surgery happened. He was 7 years old. He knocked on a door in the rain, and you were on the other side." "I know," she said. "But," he said, and the word landed in the room like something carefully, deliberately placed, "I also know that people are more than the worst thing they've ever done. I know that because I needed to believe it about myself in the years when I had nothing. When I was the kid no one was coming back for." He looked at her. "I needed to believe that what I had been left with, by you, by circumstance, by a system that didn't care about my story, was not the final word on who I was. And if I believe that for myself, I have to be willing to believe it for other people, even the ones who hurt me." Clara pressed her lips together. "That doesn't mean I trust you," he said. "It doesn't mean I'm opening a door and saying, 'Come in, let's be family.' It means I am choosing not to be someone who withholds basic human decency from a person who is suffering regardless of history. That's more grace than I earned." "It's not grace," he said. "It's principle. There's a difference." She nodded slowly. "What happens now?" she asked. He thought about it. "You recover," he said. "You take the second chance at life that you have been given, and you do something real with it, something honest." He paused. "And I go back to my life. And maybe, not now, not yet, but maybe there is some version of knowing each other that is possible at a distance. A phone call sometimes, a meal once in a while. Nothing that costs either of us more than we can afford. And if I ask for more than that," he looked at her steadily, "then I will tell you honestly that I cannot give it, and you will accept that, because that is the only way this works." She looked at him for a long moment, and then she said something that surprised him. She said, "You're a good man," not to flatter, not to manipulate, not with the desperation of someone trying to hold on to something. She said it the way you say something that you simply, factually know to be true. "You did that," he said, "not by being there, but by leaving. You left me no option but to build myself. And whatever I built, that's yours too in some terrible, backwards way that I don't entirely have language for yet." She almost smiled. It was not a happy smile, but it was real, and real, they were both learning, was worth more than anything else on offer. Clara Whitmore left the hospital 31 days after the surgery. She did not go back to luxury. There was none left to go back to. She rented a modest apartment in a quiet part of Lagos. Nothing like the penthouse. Nothing like Geneva. Just rooms that were hers and a window that looked out onto a neighborhood that had actual life in it. Markets. Children. The sound of generators and music. And someone cooking in the evening. She got a job. Not waitressing. Her health wouldn't support that yet. But administrative work at a small NGO that ran programs for children in the foster system. She had applied for reasons she did not entirely examine. And she had been hired. And on her first day, she had sat at her desk and looked at a bulletin board covered in photographs of children. Round faces, careful eyes, small hands. And she had been very quiet for a long time. She worked hard. She asked nothing of anyone that she hadn't earned. And twice in the first year, once in December, once in July, her phone rang with a Lagos number she had saved under a single initial. The calls were short, practical. He asked how she was. She answered honestly. He told her something small about his work. She listened. Neither of them pretended it was more than it was. Neither of them pretended it was less. The second call, the July one, ended with something that surprised them both. She said, "Thank you for calling." And he said, after a moment, "Thank you for answering." It was not reconciliation. It was not the yellow dress and the crayon drawing and the kitchen in the morning. It was two adults choosing to be an imperfect, careful, honest contact across a distance that might never fully close. And it was, in its own quiet and specific way, enough. Not everything that breaks can be fully repaired. Not every story ends with arms around each other and tears of joy and the music swelling as the credits roll. Some stories end like this one. Not with a door thrown open, but with a small window, cracked just enough to let in air. Eli James Whitmore, who had once been a boy with no one and nothing but his own stubborn determination to survive, had built a life that was genuinely, completely his. And he had done the hardest thing a wounded person can do. He had refused to let his wound define his character. Clara Whitmore, who had once been a tired young woman who made the worst choice of her life, had stopped running. She had stopped performing. And she had begun at 42, the slow and unglamorous work of becoming someone who deserved the time she had left. And the lesson, if there is one, the thing this story leaves sitting in your chest long after the words stop, is not about karma in the fire and lightning sense. It is about this. Every choice you make is a seed. You do not always live to see what grows from it, but it grows. It always grows. And sometimes, if you're lucky enough and humbled enough and brave enough, you live long enough to sit in the shade of something you never planted, that grew from the child you want abandoned, in the rain, on a pavement, with a torn backpack and bare feet, and a heart that refused, against every reason it had, to close. Some people learn too late that love is the only wealth that cannot be replaced. But some people, just some, learn in time to do something with that knowledge. And that is the difference. That is the whole difference. Now it is your turn. Did Eli make the right choice? Would you have gone back? Would you have given that part of yourself to someone who left you with nothing? There is no wrong answer. Drop it in the comments. This is a space for real conversation, real reflection, real stories. And if this story moved something in you, if it found something in you that needed to be found, please hit the like button. Share this video with someone who needs to hear it, and subscribe to this channel so you never miss what comes next. Because we tell stories here that do not just entertain. We tell stories that stay. And the next one, we promise you, will change the way you see someone in your life. We will see you there.